Again, we're here with Leigh Ewin. He's an Australian biohacker living in Finland, probably many other things. Leigh, what were you speaking about today?
Well, it's kind of funny because usually I'm helping people with breathing and talking about breathing and guiding and facilitating people when to breathe and how to breathe. But today I was teaching them or showing some things about not breathing, which is basically breath holding.
Breath holding. Why is breath holding so important?
Well, basically the CO2 is the actual trigger to release oxygen from the blood. So it's not until we don't breathe that the body gets the signal to release the oxygen. So if you think about it, like to put it in like context, so it's kind of graspable. If you think about a hyperventilation, you know, hyperventilation usually means somebody's like, so you can't tell that person, hey, just breathe. Just get the oxygen in and you'll be okay. So what do? We give them a brown paper bag. So they exhale the CO2 into the bag, goes back inside, they re-inhale that CO2, goes back in, and then slowly that level rises inside the blood, and then they can breathe again. They can normalize their breathing. So that kind of demonstrates or illustrates, hopefully, that the role of CO2. Like that's why we use the brown paper bag, actually.
Very interesting. So I went through the whole mental healthcare system and physical healthcare system after a time of extreme trauma and being persecuted and stressed. And not even once in that entire year process did anybody ever tell me to breathe. And then somebody casually mentioned to me something called Foursquare Breathing that I saw you explaining about. Tell us what that is. Yeah,
so, well, to kind of go inside of that, like to kind of dig away at that a little bit, I think breathing is sort of the first place where you'll see somebody's state, somebody's mood. And I would also say that if like we're led to believe that we breathe about 25,000 times in a day, like how many of those breaths are actually conscious? Like how many of those breaths are we, like right now, even if I say that, I saw that you're like, okay, how am I breathing actually?
Yeah.
You know, this is the thing. So if you're not breathing, you're not taking kind of, I don't want to say control, or if you're not influencing your own breathing yourself, what is going to be influencing that? And quite often it's the surroundings and it's all these different inputs around us. And you end up breathing, like if there's like some big things going on in the world or so on, it can affect your breathing in a great way. So, or in a big way. So that's why we see so many people that are like looking for answers and like entering the medical system, and you know, unfortunately, still not getting the attention that it deserves breathing. Now, in terms of this 4x4 breathing, well, actually today I was talking about reducing the rate of breath as well. So adding pauses into the natural way that you breathe. So for many of us, like I said, a little bit with the hyperventilation, it's usually like a 2-part breath where we inhale and then we exhale. But I'm kind of encouraging people or inviting people to take a little pause. So breathing in, pausing, exhaling, then pausing at the end of that. So what that does is allow for the CO2 to rise. It allows for better oxygen delivery into the cells. And then it also takes longer time. So you're actually reducing the rate of breath. And as we've heard today from maybe 1 or 2 other speakers, actually breathing less is going to help you live longer.
I don't know the whole total science behind it. All I know is that when I breathe in 4 counts, held for 4 counts, breathe out, basically not even 4 counts, but just till all the air from my lungs was gone. At some point I was doing it like all day, every day. It completely changed my life. Like I don't really do it anymore because I'm in a kind of perpetual relaxed state now, but I can definitely say something happened when I did that. And I was like, why didn't anybody ever tell me it was this simple? Yeah, it's quite powerful.
Yeah, exactly. So like what I shared today about adding these pauses is kind of like a micro version of this box breathing. So box breathing is just lengthening that process like 4, 4, 4, 4, like this, like 4 inhale, 4 pause, 4 exhale, 4 pause. And like kind of like packaging that up and giving that to people as the first point in like reference so that they like slow their natural rate of breathing. Because obviously the more you practice this, the more it becomes sort of like a behavior and the less you have to actually think about it. So the conscious element of breathing might end up becoming your default version. You're breathing so well and so like correctly and, you know, minimally, that it actually becomes the default way of breathing.
I overheard you with the other breathing masters talking about the spleen. What does that have to do with breathing?
Well, yeah, it's spleen. Like there's been a lot of research done on this, and the spleen is like a blood reservoir. So the blood in there is like the highest quality, most like highest oxygen level blood that you have in your body.
Okay.
It's about 8% of all the red blood cells are stored in there, and what's been found is that on apnea, which is like breath holding, even 30 seconds, one of my slides from today said that even after 30 seconds breath hold, either after the exhale or after the inhale, the spleen size actually changes. It decreases in size, which means that it's actually like kind of, in a way, if I can say, squirting that good, or like, you know, releasing that good healthy blood into your body, into your system. So it's kind of a way that we can sort of hack into, you know, I see people that are doing, when they're training, usually they do these kind of, you know, like this big breathing. Maybe we just need to do breath holds, recreate the perfect chemistry inside the blood before you actually do the endurance training or the gym training or whatsoever. So this is kind of the role of the spleen. It's a blood bank. It's crazy how much potential it has, but it's crazy how little we know about, like we actually use this in daily life.
Is it accurate then that if you hold your breath, your spleen actually makes more red blood cells?
Well, so there's different studies have shown that it can be like a 1 hour that it returns to its normal size again. Okay. So like after, especially if you're doing a maximum breath hold, it takes about 1 hour for it to return to its normal size, which means that it's already producing red blood cells again. So there's a bit of a myth, you know, with breath holding too, that people think, oh, if you don't breathe and you're not getting oxygen to the brain and you're killing your brain cells and things like that. And yeah, granted, if you're doing that like crazy long length of time, yeah, it could be possible. But actually we're saying that like even 30 seconds, or even like most people have a max breath hold time of about 2 minutes. They calmly breathe, and then they can usually achieve 2 minutes. This is an ample amount of time to get a splenic contraction, yeah.
I actually challenge our viewers for that one, because normal people holding their breath for 2 minutes, if you're actually used to living in chronic stress, I think you'll find it very difficult to hold your breath for even 1 minute. Like,
yeah, that's true. And then you have like sort of like unhealthy holding the breath too, right? So if people are scared, or if for example, if you're walking onto a stage or one of these, you kind of feel the heart beating and you're actually not breathing. So, you know, we're again, it becomes this the question of conscious, like how do you want to breathe? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve when you're breathing as well? So usually when in those situations, high stress situations, we want to reduce the rate of breath. We want to lengthen the exhale. We're not looking for the real breath hold. We're not really looking for someone to max out the breath hold when they're in a fight or flight mode or something like this. And
that's interesting because people sigh just automatically when they're stressed. So that's basically breathing out. Yeah,
exactly. It's good that you mention this, because like if you think back some of the best hugs you've ever had in your life, it's usually when someone wraps their arms around you and then they kind of
relax into it.
They give you this signal, or this this signal that they're like, okay, I'm here. It's good to see you. I feel safe now. And even just having this sigh as a sort of a tool, guiding people towards that. A lot of the breath work experiences, or like the sessions that I facilitate, we breathe just like this. We don't have to be hugging, but we can just really be breathing where we're releasing on the exhale and vocalizing that. So we do have a sigh of relief. So I'd be interested to see. I think they're doing studies on this as well. I think there's 1 or 2 studies that show that what the sigh actually does for the body, and the vagal tone, and like calming the body and the nervous system. Yeah.
I don't know the science, but I've just noticed that like you relax into something. What's your guidance for if somebody wants to apply this holding your breath on a practical level? What does that look like on a daily basis? Do you just once or twice a day, or is there some certain time of the day where it's good to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, again, in my presentation, I tried to give people 3 different options of how how to utilize this. The first one, again, was this 4-part breath. It's kind of, in a way, not breath holding like that, but it is,
regulated.
It's an effect. Yeah, it's regulating the person's breathing. Everyone can sit there in a crowd and sit here now and do that if they wish. Then there was the Wim Hof Method. A lot of people understand this method. It's breathing, 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 and then having these there's an invitation to take the pause or the breath hold in that practice longer and further as well.
Okay, so is it, I think everybody's heard the word, but what is that in the short version of Wim Hof?
So Wim Hof breathing is about 30 or 40 breaths, sort of. Actually, it doesn't matter so much if you're breathing through your mouth or through your nose, but the idea is initially we're giving away the CO2. Okay. So we're actually breathing out a lot more CO2. Then, 30 or 40 repetitions. Then we get to the pause, which is kind of like a hold. We say pause because hold for some people brings a negative connotation to that. So we're inviting people to take these nice pauses, and then just when they feel this strong signal inside that they'd like to breathe again, that's when they reintroduce air in, and they take an inhale and do a pause with the lungs full of air.
How long do you pause for?
About 20 seconds.
20 seconds.
And what's happening there, obviously, is in that pause, is that the CO2 level rises, the oxygen actually released from the hemoglobin, which is in the blood, and then also at the end of that, we're taking more oxygen in, again on a pause, which means more CO2, so that oxygen that we've just breathed in is actually getting driven into the cells as well. So it's a really, really good way of getting the oxygen delivery, which is why people feel really tingly and like, whoa, my whole body's coming alive. But again, you only have to do this kind of maybe once a week, because the health benefits last from 6 to 7 days.
Wow. Inflammation
goes down, because of the stress hormones rise a little bit, like adrenaline goes up and cortisol rises when you're doing these really long, it's like a hormetic effect, like a stress response. Body wants to adapt, it wants to give you some energy, wants to give some fuel to kind of combat this. And that actually suppresses the white blood cells in the body.
Okay.
So that's kind of like this funny little effect. Like we're forever walking around saying, hey, stress is bad, stress hormones are so bad for you. And over 24 hours a day, that's exactly what it is. It's really horrible for you. But when we do it in an acute burst, or for 30-second breath hold, or 1 or 2 minutes, something like this, we actually see positive effects of this, because the body's intelligent.
Do you think so? It's good to do that throughout, once a week, you said, is enough?
That's also one thing. It's a personal thing. A lot of people practice these things daily.
Okay.
Sure, that's okay. It helps people. But if you only need to do that, the minimum recommended dose you need of that is once a week.
Which is good to know. Even if I'm doing this just once a week, my life is going to be that much better.
Yeah, of course. And then, the final one that I was suggesting is people do the max breath hold. And I think, Casper has been talking about that today. Gave a really nice demonstration of that, and a good example of just performing these max breath holds. In the studies, again, people that performed max breath hold actually saw huge splenic contraction. So when you max out, again, the body feels this hormetic, it wants to respond, it wants to give you some fuel. It's saying, hey, we don't have any oxygen here, we're really, really low levels of oxygen. Okay, the spleen contracts maybe once, maybe twice in some instances, and gives you oxygen.
What's actually happening when you do a max hold? Are you increasing your lung capacity or something else? Yeah,
I mean, that's happening for sure. But again, chemically, what's happening is the CO2 is rising to a point where, then you're getting chemoreceptors are getting this messaging. They're like, okay, now usually you have a residual amount of oxygen in inside of your body, about 20%, I think. It's okay, now we need to use this. Okay, and when you get really, really low, then we need the splenic contraction. We give you some stress hormones, some adrenaline, which is glucose, energy, also coursing around your veins. So it's kind of a chain, this really, really fascinating chain of events that's happening. Usually you're seeing this in somebody who's super, in a fight or flight, but we're laying there. In many cases, we're just laying there, holding the breath, to some nice music, or, it's kind of we want this. Again, it's the conscious element.
So there's a definite connection between this and sort of creating new habits or new neural pathways or something. Because basically, if you're in fight or flight, that's just a habit. Like you've been in trauma so long, it's a habit.
Yeah.
So would you say this breathing, like 40 breaths out and holding for 20 counts, 30 counts, is that changing the habit or what's really going on?
Yeah, well, again, if you really think about the Wim Hof Method breathing, like this is a really active breath. So we're really asking people to be 40 times.
Okay.
Like really, when are you breathing like that? You'd probably be kind of walking up a hill or doing some light exercise, right? So it's kind of very active, and that can be very overstimulating for somebody who's already overstimulated. It's not until we get to the pauses and you kind of ask the people to relax and not breathe, that's the part where they can be a bit more still. So I would be personally recommending, I wouldn't necessarily recommend people that are in this kind of overdriven state, fight or flight state, overactive nervous system. I wouldn't be recommending them do these really, really long max breath holds.
Okay.
Dip the toes in the water first, maybe do 30 seconds and see how it feels, or even less. Otherwise it might trigger a little bit more. But of course, any breathing to do with longer exhales is always good. Regulating the vagal tone, calming the nervous system. The vagus nerve itself is kind of like plugged into your exhale anyway. So the longer we exhale, or then we hum, or we sing, or this sigh of relief is also stimulating the vagus nerve, which we mentioned as well. There's something about the vocality as well of the vagal tone. It's sort of interlinked there as well. So and gargling water is like maybe even one of the best ways to trigger the vagus nerve.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a fun fact you didn't know.
So now we're going to see biohackers getting kombucha and gargling that or something.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, it's fascinating. But like to put to underline this, calming breath is usually related to a longer exhale, slower breathing, longer exhale.
I would say one thing about holding your breath is that you can't actually overthink or do anything because your body goes into panic, like stop worrying about the future, you're gonna die. So that's one advantage I've noticed, even in I've healed myself from PTSD and it's like that helped when you can't meditate, you can't do anything else. Just hold your breath.
It is a fascinating training mechanism, because it's like you said, it's just you. Like when you're performing a max breath hold, we're not even talking about going in the water and actually practicing free diving either. We've got people that are holding. A friend of mine, he just celebrated that he can now officially got to the 8-minute mark.
Wow.
He can hold his breath for 8 minutes, and that's like static. So he's not moving about. He's not using oxygen. It's just like floating there. That probably gives him some 5 minutes under the water.
Okay.
Like 5 or 6 minutes under the water. Yeah. Because of course, when you're under the water, you're using blood and there's a lot of extra demand on oxygen and blood in the body. But it's a fascinating journey inside of yourself. And this is one way that you can I'll be honest as well, not caring, like letting go, like really letting go is so key to maximizing a breath hold. Of course, there's biomechanical things and there's sort of taking as much air as, techniques of how to do this, but actually kind of letting go is like the key practice inside of this that kind of determines the outcome ultimately.
Breathe your way to a long and happy life.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being with
Thanks
us here today.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.